Yep, sorry.
Hello,
Hello!
everyone.
Completely lost, completely fluffed it, didn't get the ready
Yeah,
for
because
action
I'm
in there.
sitting there waiting for you to say hello. That you're normally first in, and
Completely
then
fluffed
there I
it.
was, just staring at you. You staring at me.
Like I said, knowing you, knowing me.
Yeah,
Ah. It's too. I'm knackered tonight. How are you, Robin?
I'm not too bad. Feel like in a state of limbo. I feel like
Sort of backwards under a pole.
yes, that's exactly it. Yeah, yeah. No, I don't know about you, Pete, but obviously school is starting again soon.
Yeah.
And in fact, my one of mine goes back tomorrow, and then another one goes back Thursday, and another one goes back Friday. And so it won't be, but it's all a bit. The last week or so has been like this huge intake of breath before it starts again, and we're kind of exactly kind of. I'm not doing anything really. Or we were away at the weekend at my in-laws as well, but I'm not doing anything. And my middle son who starts school tomorrow is starting a new school, and he gets a bit anxious. So it's been everything every night. It's been like, it's tonight the night he's going to freak out, but he hasn't yet.
Touch wood.
Yeah, so I'm really proud of him. But yeah, that's all been going on. So I haven't really thought about Underworlds or anything all week.
That's good.
Uh,
It's good to know.
yeah.
Well, you sort of saying, oh, it's been a funny old week, but it's like it's only Tuesday, so it kind of envelops last week though. But since
I
our
mean,
last
since
show,
last week,
yes,
I think bank holiday weekend is always odd. Anyway, and so we went to have my in-laws. We didn't stay at their house. We stayed in hotels, and because we didn't book it till late, we had to stay in two different hotels on the two different nights. So it was all a bit crazy and mad. And I ate too much, etc., etc. But no, but all is good, really.
good,
How
good.
about you?
Yes, I'm not too bad. My eldest was a bit unwell. I think we went out yesterday in the sun, and I think he got a bit of heat stroke basically, and he was not feeling very well all night. But of course, he's fine today, as they do. They bounce back overnight, and It's the adults left feeling crap. But no one came here to listen to us talk crap like this tonight. They wanted to hear about underworlds.
Underworld.
And
I like to bring the human side.
yeah.
But I think that's partly because then I have to talk about underworlds less. But I like to bring the human side. I think it's I'd like to know about all our viewers really. How they're getting on and what have you.
So talking about viewers, who have we got on tonight? We've got Matt Collins, we've got Andrew Marlowe, Daniel Bungay, Michael Snap. Daniel, your parcel is on its way. It will be on its way tomorrow. It's being picked up tomorrow. Wolfman Gaz, Craig Sargent, Rosa, Maliki, Milky Paints, whose models we just got today. They look super duper. Brian D, Rosa, I think I've already said, Matt, Andrew Marlowe, Megaloz, C. Muley, Jonathan Grant, who's been thinking about what we said last week, which I was pleased to read just then. No Beef, Megaloz again, David Henson. I think I've got everyone. Daniel Santos. Hello, everybody. 26 of you already tuned in tonight. Thank you for coming along to listen to us prattle. We do like a good prattle. That's how we do. So tonight, I just read Jonathan Grant's comment about other warbands that are unique to Underworlds, and he was saying the Wolf Riders are a bit sort of unique because they're a bit more of a throwback to the world that was, which is kind of true because you don't really get Wolf Riders now in AOS, do you?
I don't know.
I think
I've played AOS in years.
I think they're a bit too generic. They're a bit too sort of un-IPable. You can't be a goblin riding a wolf. It's got to be like a goblin riding a two-headed snake spider demon thing or something.
That's true.
So yeah, that's true. But anyway,
just talk to yourself for a second. I've just got to answer this text. I'm really sorry.
He's just gonna sit here and talk to his other friends. So we'll just sit here and wait, shall we, everyone? Shall we? Anyway, Matt Collins says he's pretty sure that Wolf Riders don't exist now. I don't think it is that. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think they do exist now. And Matt said, and Wolfman Gaz says it's going to be weirdly quiet. I think it is going to be weirdly quiet. All parents who've been stuck at home for months, 6 months maybe, with their children are going to be suddenly like, "Oh God, what?" It's
going to be freaky. It's going to be freaky.
It's going to suddenly be thousands and that. Yeah, Loz says, read out to the whole class, Robin. You have something, Brooks? Did you watch the show with the whole class?
I've been really looking forward to them going. For being at school, but actually now I'm starting to not look forward to it. Now it's coming. I shall miss them.
Think of all that painting time. Think of all that painting time suddenly. There'll be like 50 pictures a day for Robin. I've painted something else. I've done this. Something else. But so I think it's going to be crazy. It's going to be quiet. I mean, I've been working obviously throughout the whole thing, and obviously the kids and the wife have been downstairs the whole time I've been working. My youngest has been coming in about every half an hour, basically saying, "Have you finished work yet? Can we play on the Wii U or the Switch?" I'm like, "No, I'm still working till 4:30." And then he comes back about half an hour later at maybe 11:45. "Have you finished work yet?" Still not. But there we go.
Right.
So there we are. Robin's finished. And he's not going to tell us what he was sending because it's probably dirty. And so here we go.
It's supposed to do a lift for school.
Oh, okay. Very dull. Very dull then. So here we are tonight, and our discussion for tonight is competitive play bad for gaming? Now, we've put gaming. We want to keep it a little bit more generic, but we are going to focus a fair bit on Underworlds because that is our spécialité, as it were.
Yeah, or GW gaming generally, I think.
Yeah. Street Pass Liverpool says, sorry, he's late. Don't worry, you haven't missed literally anything yet.
Haven't really got much to add about other games, competitive wise. But yeah, we'll see. So this kind of came about from various conversations over various weeks, and I have to say I kind of flip-flop on it. There's times when I just think, the competitive side of things is kind of just gets me down. It's like it's kind of a race to the most efficient deck possible, yada yada yada, and that's a really bad thing. And then other times, like last week after playing. We played Morgwaith versus the Crushers, and I was, Pete's deck was just destroyed by him, and I kind of thought, actually, I can see how these orcs can be abused, and I was feeling quite sort of sad about it, and thinking if everybody's just going to play these orcs at the back, getting glory, and that's going to be the most competitive, efficient way to play. And then almost immediately after that, there was that deck that actually won or one in the final of
Vassal
the
tournament, yeah.
online Vassal tournament. And it was like completely and utterly refreshing, breath of fresh air. I would never have thought of it in a million years. And you think actually, yeah, the competitive scene is great.
Hurrah!
Because it comes up with all these brilliant ideas. So I really do flip flop on whether I think competitive play is good or bad for gaming.
Some people wrote comments regarding this on Patreon, says Mr. Marlowe.
Copious dose. I really like
Copious,
Andrew's
copious
answer. But
notes.
the short answer is no. And what he did,
Boiled
the Andrew
down.
Marlowe answer is really, really long.
So I think I agree with you with what you said about the Oryx. Is the minute you see a warband like that, you can sit there and think, oof, I can really see how you can abuse that warband, and that's something that goes hand in hand with competitive scenes, is the abuse of not necessarily cheating or breaking the rules, but bending those rules,
Yeah,
getting that crowbar in there, and
yeah,
really leverage as much as you can out of certain cards. And I think one of the examples that came out was one of the latest cards enables you to make an attack as a reaction to an attack. And then if you also have, I can't remember what's called, something like duelist speed or something, which means that immediately after that attack you can push your fighter 1 hex, which effectively makes you immune to range 1 attacks. Because you attack and then you move away. Like, technically it's not breaking the rules, but it's a bit of a shitty move. So by the wording of the rules, unless a tournament organizer does something about it, the competitive thing would be to do that, and then you're going to have a fairly invulnerable fighter. Now that kind of thing bugs me a little, but then I have to try and sort of balance that up with the fact that I'm very unlikely to ever move in those circles. So is it necessarily a terrible thing, and would anyone really ever do it seriously? And I wonder if anybody really would. There's always going to be that one person, but I doubt very much, or at least I doubt more, especially in Underworlds, that there are very many of those kind of people, because I think they would quickly make a name for themselves and people would just avoid them, because Underworlds isn't that big of a scene. It's not like 40k, which
no,
is like much
no.
bigger.
But you do get situations, and I think you can see how competitive play is good for the game. I think St. Andrew said in his comments on Patreon, we have had situations where decks that kind of break the game have been the top decks, and several people play them. So I'm talking about relics, obviously, at this point, which, the 4 or 5 people took them to a Grand Clash, and those 4 or 5 people got through to the top 4 or 5, and it was really boring. And that's kind of like, that's the worst case scenario, isn't it? And that, so people will do it. I think if there is an obvious kind of meta-defining, meta-breaking set of cards, people will take them. Enough people will take them to make the game boring. Luckily, due to intervention through various methods in the game, that's only happened once, and that doesn't really happen now. There's kind of normally 2 or 3 different ways to play, so there's never one massively on top. And I kind of, part of the reason I wanted to have this discussion was I kind of thought that there's almost like 2 competitions going on. There's the competition at tournaments, which we'll perhaps talk about in a minute. Malachi and Andrew both had some really good comments on the tournament scene. But there's almost like another battle going on between the top players and the designers of the game. And the top players basically say, right, give us your game. Well, we're going to find a way to, like Pete said, we're going to find a way to break that, or at least squeeze the most advantage out of it as possible. And then the designers go, right, okay, well, you've done that, so obviously we're going to have to ban these cards, and then we're going to have to bring in these new cards as well. And then the top competitive players take all that away and go, right, okay, well, now you've done this, we're going to break it in this way. And so you end up with this interesting battle on that level. Between the very top players and the designers themselves. So sorry, Pete.
Hey, so have you
Yeah.
kind of sort of off onto a side note there. Yeah. So and Matt Collins has kind of highlighted that one thing, in that you can have different sort of metas, and you can have a sort of a loose competitive, which is kind of where I think we sort of fit a bit. We're sort of the loose competitive to the more fun sort of meta. We'll try and pick lists that we think are effective quite often, and use good cards. We're certainly not going to pick absolutely rubbish cards. but we're certainly not at that bleeding edge of competitive card selection because we don't care that much. Although on the few occasions where we've played like finalist lists against each other, we've always enjoyed those because the lists just play themselves fantastically.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people commenting here that a lot of it is to do with the player base and the game itself, and there's a kind of difference I think between competition and being competitive, if that makes sense. Like you can have a competition, everybody can go, and there will be a winner at the end of the day, but actually most people are just trying out different things and playing different. Well, somebody said there that everybody brings a different warband each week, and there are people who are naturally good at the game. They naturally build good decks, and I say naturally, it might be naturally by playing 100 times a week, but they understand how the positioning of the game works. I know somebody talked about this, the Vassal deck that I was talking about, the Blake Coven one, the positioning of can't remember the guy who played it now. Is it Tommy? I can't remember.
Tommy or Tom or
Yeah,
Tommy? Yeah,
yeah, his positional play is excellent. So. And obviously that makes a massive difference. And now I've forgotten what point I was going to make. So, but so I think you do get that. They get a very friendly scene. I mean, Grand Clash. The Grand Clash is always there are 10 or 15, 20 people who are the kind of top, and they take it very seriously. But everybody else just turns up and has a really good time and does the best with the deck that they've built.
Yeah, I think it's probably higher than. Did you say percent or just 20 people?
People, I said.
Oh, okay.
So I was talking about the top 16, where I was thinking you have the top 16, and you can almost predict who those 16 are going to be.
Then, because last time we went, Michael Carlin, who I would always put in the top 6, he came like, I can't remember, he didn't come near top 16 because he had
that's true.
things, didn't
That's
he?
true. Yeah.
I reckon, you maybe of top 30 to 40 players, I at least have got an eye on getting into a finishing position, top 16 kind of thing. And then you've got a good chunk of people who are like us. Well, maybe not like us, maybe not that bad, but you've got a good chunk of people who've come along to have fun and maybe try and win some games. They've got some desire to win games, and then you've got a group of people, maybe a similar amount to the really serious players who are just there for a laugh and just play some games against various other people.
Yeah. And Matt said Underworld is heavily promoted as competitive, so if you go in expecting casual, you're going to have a bad time. I'm not sure. I suppose if you expect, I don't know what the difference between expecting casual is, but I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. I think obviously if you come up against one of the really good players in the first round, that's going to go badly for you. But generally, I reckon you'll find your level, even if that level's at the bottom like mine, and have a good time. I think the problem can be that people, because it has a competitive element, then if you're just trying to get into the game, you've got the problem of if you haven't got all the cards, then you can't play as strongly. But secondly, you have to be up on what the restricted cards are, because although people say, well, you don't have to play restricted because you can just play casual. I think even at casual nights at games, shops and things, which I haven't got much experience of, but my impression is mostly people do play to the tournament rules in the sense that they use the restricted lists, and they use the most recent iteration of the rules, the FAQ and everything. If you're not up on that, you might have a worse experience potentially. So it makes it a little bit hard to get into, maybe.
Yeah. Malachi does provide a good point where he said that Warcry is a good casual game. You could take the scoring out of the game and it would still be fun, and I think that's mostly right. I mean, you still want some way of being able to track who's won, although it wouldn't be as important. But if you took the scoring out of Underworlds, it doesn't really work.
No, it doesn't.
It's kind of true. No. So I guess the question is, what do you class as? What is the definition of a competitive game versus a casual game? And maybe Underworlds, by its very nature, is a competitive game, however you play it. And something like Warcry is a casual game, regardless of how you play it. Maybe there's something of that maybe about it.
Yeah. It's just, Dave Henderson says, my nan says it's taking part that's important, but what does she know? She doesn't win anything.
That's just what losers say. That's what losers tell the kids. So the kids don't mind when they're losers too. So I think that Underworlds, but again, we're not just talking about Underworlds here. We're talking about gaming in general, and is competitive gaming
Yeah.
or competitive play bad for gaming in general? And I think, um, looking at it from that point of view, that's a real double-edged sort of sword, because without competitive players, you are going to struggle in some cases to really test those rules out, to really, really get those rules under a microscope. But at the same time, casual players probably don't care about that.
No, I kind of think that's a bit of a vicious circle argument. If you don't need to explore how you might exploit a particular card interaction if nobody's that bothered about exploiting it.
Yeah,
I don't think the time trap situation would ever have occurred. Problem would have occurred if it had just been people like me and you playing, Pete.
yeah,
Because it would never have occurred to us. Or like things like the strict wording on calculated risk and martyred. I think, but I mean, I know obviously that everything's a personal interpretation, but I think we would both be like, well, that's just daft. Why? How could you possibly score both at once? It would never have occurred to us to ask the question.
yeah, yeah.
So I think that I don't know whether you need somebody to test that. I do feel the game has got better as the iteration of the rules has gone on, and things like the developers have discovered that card like combination strike and great gains are too powerful. They need to have a bit of mitigation, so they've got these new ones where you can only score off duels, and I can't remember what the new one's called, but the one where you have to score a certain number of hybrids, certain number of
Yeah.
dual cards, and that kind of thing. They're much more difficult to score, so those kind of things does improve the game. So that's definitely
One negative I would say that competitive play has for games, or for something like Underworlds at least, is that quite often when people get into it, one of the first things people quite often ask is like, well, what's a good deck? What are the good cards? And there's this good flag that goes It's like, don't take these cards, they're trash. Take those cards, they're good. And it immediately puts people into this sort of state of mind of winning is the main aim, not playing it. And for something like Underworlds, maybe again because of the way the game is designed, and it's a bit more board game-esque. Maybe that's okay. Although for me personally, I always dislike it when people are told, "Don't take these cards; they're rubbish," or "This deck's crap. You want to change all these cards around," because it all depends on why people have built that deck or what they're going for. Whether they just want a fun laugh deck which they want to play around with. Something else. Again, going back to something like Warcry, maybe. There might be models in Warcry where people say, "Don't take whatever they are, Skaven clan rats, because they're trash. For the points, you might as well take one less Skaven storm vermin or whatever because they're so much better." But
yeah.
that doesn't matter so much because people don't play Warcry because they want to go for, or at least I think a larger group of people don't play things like Warcry because they want to win. They just like the game because it's nice, simple rules, it's quick to play, and it's a fun little narrative to go through.
Yeah, although that's interesting you say that, because again, one of the things when I've been doing my prep for this evening was I noticed that there was some chat about the House of Blades book and saying that the Escher were no good, and so that they weren't strong enough and they weren't competitive, which almost to me, from what I understand of Necromunda, is entirely missing the point of Necromunda, and it's not meant to be particularly a competitive game. Which is obviously different to Underworlds, but you get that mentality, and you think you get that mentality in all games that why play if you're not going to try and win, and so then why would you pick something that isn't going to? And obviously different people have different ideas of what they want as their chances of winning, but why would you play something that you're not going to win with? Which I can definitely see. Is Necromunda a competitive game? Well, I don't think it is competitive, but people obviously clearly do play it. Well, some people do.
Anything to be competitive, can't it? So
even if it's narrative, it is nice to win. I'm not going to lie. When my Escher girls are beating the shit out of Pete's Goliath, that is more fun than when he's throwing them down pits and things. It just is more fun to win than it is to lose, I think.
I think part of it is how you approach the game. Andrew Marlowe said that his ethos in game is always, if you're playing to win, then you're missing the point of playing a game. But that's just him, and I kind of agree with that to an extent. I think obviously if you go to a Grand Clash or a tournament and you're going to just have a bit of fun, that's absolutely fine. But you are going to meet a lot of people there who are out to win, and you have to
Yes,
brace for that when you enter it.
absolutely.
But likewise, oddly, Matt said that he went to a Warcry organised event and that put him off of it, and maybe that's because Matt, you saw that as more of a enjoyable sort of leisurely game, and then it had a competitive spin put on it, and that made it much more unlike what you were wanting out of it in the first
Yeah, I
place.
was going to follow up on that actually, Matt. What put you off? Can you succinctly comment? Comment below that is interesting because Magic the Gathering have made millions by focusing on highly competitive play, and that is true. And I think that's an interesting observation that clearly there is a demand for solid competitive games because Magic have cornered that market, and X-Wing to an extent too, as I understand it, which Underworld hasn't quite yet. And that does mean that the Underworld's community is quite small, and as No Beef has said, that the top tier Underworld's players are all almost to a man lovely. Um, so yeah, I think that is very true. The community is great. Matt says, "Sorry, did you ask me a question?" Yes, Matt. You said you enjoyed Warcry, but then you went to an organised tournament and didn't enjoy it. But I can
I
see
wonder
why.
why.
I wouldn't particularly want to play in a Warcry tournament myself. Um,
Yeah, but you wouldn't want to play in any tournament.
no, that's true. That is true.
But I think definitely for something like Warcry, my personal preference on that is definitely more um, narrative driven, and I wouldn't want to play that competitively. I don't think, because that's not how I see that game. Whereas something like Underworlds, if I went to an event, I would be fine with playing Underworlds in a more competitive setting.
Yeah.
Now, that point that was made just a bit back up by Malwinius Serrano Olfram from York, frankly, best username on here at the minute. Magic the Gathering made millions by focusing on highly competitive play. Yep, there's no denying that. Would they have made more money if they'd concentrated on coffee table game
Well,
meta?
possibly. That's
There's no
hard to know.
telling.
Possibly not, though. I don't know.
It's hard to tell because obviously you can't do that now. You can't turn back time and go down that other branch of time.
Turn back time.
But obviously you can't do that. But in the same stretch, you could say, there are a lot more people out there who are looking for easy play games than there are people looking for competitive games by a factor, probably a very large factor. And would they have spent more money if they'd have made a more generic, sort of easier going game? And that's something we can't really tell. But
Ed's made the comment that they tried to cater for all the Magic the Gathering, which I have heard. We've had a conversation on here before about the various modes that you didn't know existed, which sound quite good. Matt has made a really good point actually, which is an interesting one, which is the fact that what was about Warcry was people will effectively try to cheat, I suppose, and then. Games like more competitive games with tighter rule sets like Magic and like Underworlds are it's actually much harder to actually cheat. There is sort of there's getting the most efficiency out of your warband / cards is very different to just pretending that they've actually got 3 swords when they've got 2 swords.
One is being efficient,
which is effectively what Matt's talking about. So in some ways, the being competitive makes it a better gaming experience from that respect because the rules are tighter and they're less subjective. And that's another interesting point which I did kind of talk about is that there's kind of min-maxing in the bigger games like Warhammer and like iOS and Warhammer 40,000. That seems to be that's more extreme and very much more trying to abuse the rules rather than just trying to kind of get the most efficiency out of the rules, I suppose.
Yeah, and I guess that in itself is something that having competitive play is good for a game, because when you make a game competitive, you have to make it absolutely watertight. And when you have something that's absolutely watertight, you can go anywhere and sit down for a game with absolutely anyone, and you both know you're playing up to the same absolutely watertight rules. The minute you add a tape measure in, there is already that slight level of doubt. I mean, even when you add dice in, unless you're both rolling in a specific area and you've got a clear view on it, people will be cheeky sometimes with rolling dice behind the scene and go, "Oh yeah, that was a 6," and pick it up quickly, that kind of thing. So one very good plus side for competitive gaming is it does make rule sets generally, I think, a much tighter sort of ordeal.
Yeah, competition and rules. Competition and rulers. I think is a nightmare immediately. I mean, even when we play Necromunda, you sort of find yourself measuring things, and you almost because you want to be able to reach and you want to be able to make the charge. You almost inadvertently, well, I do anyway, because I would cheat. You almost inadvertently, put the ruler where it measures to be the right thing. Do you know what I mean?
Or even inadvertently, you measure it and you think, okay, it goes to this point on the table, but you take your eye off it for a second to pick your model up, and then you put it, and it's just maybe half an inch further or something like that, and you'll get that I've read about it in online in AOS and 40k tournaments where someone's got to a point where they're able to charge at the beginning of round 2, and the opponent's like, you physically can't because we're this distance away to start with, you only move this much, therefore it's physically impossible for you to make up that inch, so you must have moved something further than you're allowed, and then the other person gets snarky because they're being accused of cheating, possibly rightly, and they don't like being caught out, and you've just got that immediate sort of friction there between two parties because both parties want to win, and there's a reason why a lot of sports personalities are very combative and very aggressive. I mean, look at what's the name of that tennis player famous for shouting at the umpire?
John McEnroe.
Very angry man, but for a very good reason, because there was a lot of money on the line for him.
And I guess he's quite competitive.
Yes, I suspect you don't become a fairly good tennis player without having a smidge of competitive nature about you. You're not going to ever see a tennis player in the final who sort of turns up and goes, nah, fuck it, you can have it. I can't really be bothered today. Although that would be brilliant.
No, I'm sorry, that was in.
Yeah, no, definitely that was in. Are you sure that's game point? Yeah, fuck it, have it. I'm parched. I want a pint, frankly, mate. Yeah. You're never going to see that.
We've got Tim in the chat tonight, and Tim actually is one of my major reasons why I think the competitive game is just fine, because his deck, and he does well with his deck, his orc deck in particular, just it works for him, and that is why the game is in a good place, because without the competition he wouldn't have the drive to make a winning deck, but yeah, he still can. Going against all known, all accepted wisdom and thought, and still wreck people, which I think is a really great sign, and great sign for the health of the game. And again, I flip flop on the health of the game. I sometimes think, the restricted cards it means it's too it's not that healthy because they have to keep restricting cards. But on the other hand, they haven't restricted that many, and each slight restriction just changes the game up slightly, so you end up with a slightly different game, which is obviously great.
I mean, the last time they did the far list, we were like, my god, the game's alive again. Look, there's wildlife coming back that we haven't seen. There's an Eyes of the Nine deck over there. We haven't seen Eyes of the Nine in this part of the world for years, and it does suddenly reinvigorate the whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Lenny Winks pointed out earlier, it's not really related to the path we're just going down, but I wanted to highlight it because I think he's very true. He said that he thinks they missed a trick with Warcry, adding in measuring into it messed it up, and the hex-based style of Underworlds is so much better. And I agree. I think the more they could add hexes into the game wherever humanly possible, the better it gets. I keep looking at Aeronautica, just because I keep seeing it and thinking, it's hex based. I mean, that's going to be fairly easy. There's no tape measures and fluffing around, and I just think the minute I see something with hexes on it, it's a little bit less hassle because you don't have to measure. There's none of that crap going on. You can just hexes, move things around the board so much easier.
I get slightly disappointed in Necromunda games because the boards have squares on them, don't they?
Yeah.
You think, it'd just be really easy if I could just, this person fires 4 squares and this person can move 3 squares. That would make life much, much easier. Of course, it's squares, not hexes, which doesn't help. But I totally agree with you. The rulers for me nowadays kind of not spoil it, but they're not as Lenny Winks said. That just those kind of games, they can't really be competitive, even though people run massive tournaments for them. I don't think they can be competitive and fair, or at least not. I find those games there's so much in them that trying to keep them balanced and and know what's going on all the time is just too much for my little brain.
I don't have the brain, and I don't know if it's I don't have the brain. I think it's we lack the desire to want to be able to learn that game. We just look at it and think, Nah, bollocks. It's too much hassle. I can't be bothered with that. Let's just do something else that's a bit easier, that we can get our tiny heads much
Yeah,
more
I do.
comfortably around.
I do think that some of those games I've said it before as a joke, but I do think they're young man's games. If you've got a busy life with kids and things, it's really hard to find the time to sit and learn and read all the rules and read your opponent's rules, because you kind of need to do that, and B, to practice. I mean,
Yeah,
we've talked about Michael Carlin's 100 games or whatever it was with Rippers or Grimwatch, whoever it was, and you think, well, there's no way I could possibly ever do that. Even if I think I'm quite extreme. I quite struggle to carve out my own time for games, but I think other people do a little bit better than I do. But I could never, ever get anywhere near that number. So you're already on a hiding to nothing. If a number of hours you put into something is how good you are at it, which is, there's definitely a correlation. I'm never ever going to get anywhere near it.
I think that's to going back to the MTG making millions off of going highly professional. That's a bit where if you go the other way and you go casual, you've got dads, you've got parents in general, you've got people with busy lives, busy social lives who want to play something, but they don't have that time to invest in a really competitive game. If you create something nice and easy, more people are likely to pick that up and play it, and then if they have children, are more likely to say, let's play this game together with their kids, and possibly instead of out of multiple houses, that one 18-year-old who's got the time and the money equilibrium still there to be able to play ultra competitive games, you've got maybe 3 or 4 families who might all be interested in playing something together. That's a bigger market.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing about Underworlds. Actually, it does work on a casual level, even though it is competitive, and because it's tighter, because there isn't great loads of rules to learn, and things to remember, and you don't need hundreds of books to play it. Underworld, you can play with 2 warbands and just throw it down and play, and it might be a close game.
Yeah, that's true. Mr. Lennywink said that anyone who thinks that 40k AOS Warcry are meant to be competitive are miles off. They were never meant to be. They're just hobby games with cool models and scenarios. I mean, and that is true to an extent. But I mean, if you create any game, someone's going to make it competitive.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing, there's competitive Monopoly, there's competitive Scrabble.
I've got down here in my notes. I've written notes this week. People look in different colours. I've got down here. Winning is a human imperative.
That is. I mean, that is true.
Because whatever you do, but people immediately turn it into a game. And my kids, I'm sure anybody who's got kids recognises this. They turn throwing a plastic bottle in the air and getting it to land on its end into a game.
Yeah. The minute you have 2 parties and one of them can somehow be slightly better than the other in whatever made up set of rules that may exist, it'll become competitive. I mean, Dave Henson said, and I guess a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, maybe competitive rock, paper, scissors, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's a whole meta out there for rock, paper, scissors, and obviously rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock, obviously, yes.
Wolfman Gaz says the Pokemon starter decks are great for pick up and play. I did play with my oldest a little bit, and he got too good, so I stopped playing.
Well, I picked up a game recently, which is just a really simple card game, and it effectively comes down to making. It's set in like a medieval battlefield, and you've got different zones, but you're effectively making like 3 of a kind, or a straight, or 3 of the same kind of card, all that kind of thing. So it's a pretty simple game, but my youngest has beaten me every time so far, and I don't like that. So I'm determined to beat him now. But again, it's a really simple, tiny set of rules. But and obviously it's meant to be competitive because it's a one-on-one sort of game. But there's that immediate imperative now that he's beaten me twice. I've got to beat him. I'm going to have to take him down.
We've got an interesting question here, which is completely unrelated, really. Well, not really, but it's from Josh De Silva, who says him and his friend got a tiny argument over time limits. He argues a turn that takes over 3 minutes is stalling. Is this true? Well, it's hard to say with the individual. I mean, if Pete and I were stalling and we took over longer than 3 minutes a turn, then Pete and I would never play. No. Because he'd ban me. But I think it's one of those things. If you're at a tournament, if you kept doing it, you could get into trouble because it is incumbent upon you to get the game finished.
Yeah.
but once or twice, I don't really think it's stalling. But I mean, it does depend on how often you've played and what have you, and whether your friend knows you've got to go home in 10 minutes time.
Yeah, and he's currently ahead by like one
Yeah.
glory. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm just going to run down the clock on this one. I think if you're doing it deliberately, yeah, it's a bit of a dick move. If you're just doing it because, I mean, like we are, you just sit there going, I've got too many options and I don't know which one I'm going to pick.
Yeah.
And it's a legitimate sort of analysis paralysis moment, then I don't think it's a problem. If it were in a tournament setting, I think if your opponent was reliably doing it turn after turn, then yeah, as Charles has just said, I'd call a judge and just
Or
say,
a judge.
or at least
Not an
maybe
actual
not straight
judge,
away.
obviously. I don't think they'd be very impressed.
Judge Dredd, just kind of a bam, one to the skull, done. But you don't know whose skull's going to get it with Judge Dredd. That's the problem. I think I'd say something first to my opponent. I'd be like, sorry, are you taking a long time? Is it because you've never played before? Or, do you just legitimately not have a clue what you're doing? Or are you just really, really thinking about your options? Because, we do have a time limit and we've got to try and get our games in. So,
yeah. In a competitive scene, No Beef just said there was somebody at his local scene used to do that. Basically, if they won the first game, they'd be really slow in the second game, which is another interesting aspect of competitive games that I haven't really touched on. But yeah, that is an issue, isn't it? And I found it in Warhammer Underworlds Online, or I've heard about it. I haven't found it because I don't very often play. But where people will just take ages to play in the hope that you'll get bored and go home.
Yeah, especially if you're winning.
Just madness, and almost like the antithesis of what Andrew says, which is that you should be playing it for fun. Well, not should be playing it, but I can't remember what he said now. I put it very eloquently further up the chat, but basically, if
you're not doing it to have fun, you're doing it wrong, sort of.
Exactly, and of course, maybe winning at all costs or any cost is fun for some people. But yeah, that is another aspect of competing. Not really the fault of any game. It's just human nature. In order to win, there are ways to win which are against the spirit of the game, which I suppose is where I ended up go round full circle, where I ended up thinking about having this topic of conversation, because I do sometimes feel like some of the very competitive decks, Relics being the classic example, they go against the spirit of the game. And I kind of came from the thought that actually in Wonderworld and lots of games, the way to win is to have the most efficient deck possible. The more efficient your deck is and the more efficient your game plan is, the more likely you are to win. But ultimately, very efficient decks, and the Relics being the classic example, is quite boring, because it's it relies on as little interaction, as little randomness as possible. So sitting at the back and piling up tomes after getting a load of passive glory is a very efficient way to play, but it's not terribly interesting really for either party, except the person who's winning probably quite enjoying that. But other than that, it's quite tedious to play against.
But that's kind of the why you play things. Some people play because they want to win, regardless of what they have to do, who they have to piss off. It doesn't matter how unpleasant the game is for them. As long as they're winning, they're enjoying it. And we play pretty much the polar opposite of that. We can be winning a game, and if it's just down to bad dice or bad cards for the other person, we'll not actually be enjoying it that much. We'll be like, I might be winning, but I'm really hating this game, and I'd rather it was the other way around, or something like that, or it was
there was one game we played recently, and you probably felt the same last week, but one game we played recently where it was just, I was winning, but it was awful.
Yeah, and you just, yeah. And I think it comes back to, why you're playing. So if you're playing competitively, obviously you're gonna, and not everybody's like this. People can play competitively and still not be an arsehole. I think when I went to the Grand Clash, I was trying to be competitive, although maybe my deck and my warband choices weren't optimal for that. But I played competitively at least whilst I was there, but that didn't mean I was an arsehole about it. So I wouldn't take ages over my turn. I would play quickly.
No, if anything, I'm the opposite at a tournament. I'd be so worried about somebody thinking I was playing slowly. I'm just going to play. That's actually why I took the Godsworn Hunt in the first tournament we went to, wasn't it? So I didn't actually have to have any analysis paralysis. It's basically like just put an upgrade on them and charge.
Yeah. Just, I'm going to charge with that one. And now he's dead. Right, I'm going to charge with that one. Now he's dead. I'm going to charge with that one. Now he's dead. Oh, that was a lovely game. Did you enjoy that? I hated it. Anyway, let's go for a pint.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And Marlo said there. I think that was definitely. I think I hold up my end of the social contract there. It's basically just play without a thought.
But are you robbing your opponent of a good game and therefore being a bastard because you didn't play to the best of your ability?
I'm broken now.
Just imagine the next time we go to a Grand Clash, you're just going to sit there with this fixed grin. But it's like, are you going to move? You're like, I don't know.
Move or not?
Pass. No, I can't pass. I'm going to punch you. No, I need to win. No, I can't win. Oh, God.
Everybody I've played at the Grand Clash, which must be about 10 games now, have been lovely. So, I've enjoyed all of them, even when I was being repeatedly crushed into the ground.
Yeah, I think in our first Grand Clash, I played... I can't remember his name. He was quite prevalent in the higher game sort of thing. He worked at GW.
J. Clare?
J. Clare, that's it. I played J. Clare, and he had... I took Skaven, I think to sabotage my chances of winning, and he had Ilthari's Guardians, and he absolutely smashed me. But he was quick, it was a fun game, and I still enjoyed it. So, you can play against people who are there to win and still have a good time. It depends entirely on the player.
Yeah, that's true.
And yeah, I did very badly, and it was because he lost his first game. And obviously I lost my first game against some horrible big bully who beat me up in my very first Grand Clash ever. And then obviously we ended up facing off against each other, and I think that was the perfect sort of result for him, because it was best of 5 games on that first Grand Clash, so he could lose one, and as long as he won the other 4, he would do all right.
Wasn't the horrible big bully who beat you, Andrew?
Yeah. I was hoping no one would remember that. So
yeah, so there's one thing about Marlowe, that's he's a bully.
Yeah.
Everybody says
big
it.
Bully and bastard Marlowe.
Yeah, he tried to throw me off the game for a start by buying me coffee and I asked the tea.
But I think you're right. When I went to the Grand Clash, I didn't play anybody who I remember walking around the table from and thinking, God, that was painful. Win or lose, I enjoyed all the games.
Yeah.
You didn't try very hard, Andrew. That's all I can say, because you won. Try to lose weight, yeah. Hear you on that one. I am in the same boat there. So I think whether competitive's good for gaming or not kind of comes down to what you class as competitive gaming and what you class as, I know this is going to sound like a Bill Clinton defence here, but it's kind of what you class as good or bad for the game. And in some ways, the things that I think sometimes I dislike about the competitive nature of the game, I then have completely the opposite feeling about on a different day.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. As I say, I flip-flop back and forth. I always fear that the game's slipping down to having kind of really strong archetypes, and that you basically everybody's going to pick one of 2 or maybe 3 if we're lucky archetypes. But then as you say, we do get those left field decks like Tim's and Andrews, but also the one that won the Blade Coven one that won recently. That change things, but I think that having a strong competitive method with people kind of just net decking, I suppose, and kind of all working together to work out what what you don't want is a solved game state, I think they call it, don't they? Which is what Relics was, which was actually this is the best way to play and there is nothing that can beat it. That's what you want to avoid, and I kind of almost feel like, as I said at the beginning, there's this constant battle between the top players trying to solve it and the designers of the game trying to stop it from being solved. But that, as Malachi and Andrew said in the Patreon comments, that kind of drives the game forward to be better because the game does improve.
Yeah, without the competitive side of things, with people saying we need to tighten up on reaction windows, we need to tighten up on combat sequences, we need to do these things, we wouldn't have these flowcharts that we have in Season 4 now that really make things a lot clearer for newer starters to the game, whether they're playing competitively or in a sort of more relaxed format. At least they have that solid rule set there.
Yeah, I mean, Craig said net decking is fine, as people that do it mostly don't fully understand the efficiency of it without playing lots of games. That is true. There's definitely something in that.
I mean, we do
And
that quite often. We'll grab
yeah,
decks from online and we'll play those
I
for
just
matches
imagine the
sometimes.
people who spent hours lovingly honing those decks, if you'll excuse the expression,
They
must
will.
just go, oh God, when they see us
But
when they see us
on the
play them.
few occasions where we've taken a deck from online and we've had people comment on those who've watched us play their deck and then have commented afterwards, they nearly always are positive.
Yeah, true,
So
true. That's 'cause they're nice.
yeah, that's true.
Okay.
It's a good thing we decided to pick this game to base our channel on, because if we're shit, people are too nice to sell us.
That's a very
If
good
we were
point.
40k, we'd have been run out of town long ago. People would have blacklisted,
We have played
doxed
some
us.
beautiful decks, which actually just completely throw out any idea that competitive play is bad. We played Aman's deck, which was just really fun to play, although maybe more so for me than you. We played the Win
Well,
of the
you say
Grand
that
Clash.
because I had the antithesis of his deck, because I had a Marlowe special with the Sepulchral Guard
Oh yeah, well, it
with
was a
that,
good deck.
and it was
Enjoyed
still
that.
a really fun game.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The we played the final of the Grand Clash between Curse Breakers and Grimwatch, and
Yeah,
actually both those decks were absolutely, whatever the word is,
they were just mega
honed to
efficient.
perfection.
Yeah,
And those games were really good. I think we did make a couple of positional errors, but the games were really good. Um, so yeah, I think as more I talk, the more I'm thinking competitive play is good for the game.
hurrah! Thank you. Good
Um,
night. Yeah, and I think overall, I think the competitive scene needs casual players, because it needs people who are going to move up into the competitive scene, because the competitive group is relatively small in comparison to the whole group. So people are going to move on at some point. They'll either get fed up with the game, life will get in the way, jobs, families, various other factors will take people out. So the competitive market, as it were, needs that casual market to have people who are going to put themselves out there and decide that they're going to try and put that step up in and throw their hat into the ring. And the competitive group need, sorry, and the casual group need the competitive group to sit there and force the game to be better
Yeah,
and force the game to
that,
get tighter.
you do need both.
And I think I'm going to prefix or suffix that with, I think that's exactly what Malachi said once before about those two different groups and how they both sort of feed off each other and both work together in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
So
There we go. Solved.
there we go. Thank you very much. But not talking about Underworlds, talking about other games. Competitive play, is it bad for gaming? Well, something like Underworlds, not Underworlds, something like Necromunda, which I think is, obviously people do play competitively, and there is a tournament format in there, or a campaign format and stuff like that. I think overall the game is best played when it's a bit more casual.
Yeah,
There's like a team, or not necessarily team, but it's like a group activity where you're both playing the game together rather than you're just trying to beat your opponent. And
yeah,
in that situation, competitive in some ways can be bad, because, like you say, people have gone on and they've immediately gone, okay, don't take these, they're rubbish, don't take that weapon, it's crap, take this configuration, take those models. And a lot of people are going to then go, right, cool, those are the models I want, I'm not going to get anything else, because everyone has agreed that these are the best models. And a large portion of people will go that route, and then it can make things a bit samey.
yeah. Well, that's what I was concerned about with Underworlds. Is like I say, is having the one or two archetypes that's very samey, and then of course you have the problem that then if depending if how the rule set is, people taking the best loadouts of whatever game it is, you then end up it's no fun for anybody, because the people with well, no, it's fun for the people who win, but the people who want to play a bit more casually and a bit more kind of they want to try different things out, they'll just get, if there really is a top configuration that most people are taking, they'll always lose,
Yeah, yeah.
or often lose, not always, because all these games have dice and there is skill in positioning and such like.
Yeah.
There was a question up here I don't want to answer before it goes off my
Yeah.
screen,
From
which is
Malwinius.
yes, about Champions of Dreadfane pack. What you basically get for that is it is the warbands from the Dreadfane set, which was a kind of board game version of Underworlds that they packaged for Germany and the US, but not through Games Workshop. And that has its own single board, and it's basically the same game. It has a couple of extra things, but it's basically the same game. But the warbands are pretty good, particularly the Harrows, Lady Harrows. You don't get any universal cards in it. It's all faction specific cards.
Yeah.
But the both warbands are okay. But the
Harrows are definitely of a better.
Harrows are better of the two. But if you want to play, I don't think it's not going to cycle out. I don't think they've actually said, but I don't think it will cycle out when Nightvolt cycles out, because I think it's more of a Beastgrave issue, sort of era thing. I think it came out in the summer of.
It came out during Nightvolt's season.
Did it?
Came out before Beastgrave came out, yeah.
But it was towards the end of. It was in the summer, wasn't it? So it was towards the end of Nightvolt. So I'd be surprised if it's much, it doesn't matter if they cycle out. There's no universal cards in them, so ignore that. So nothing will cycle out from it. So I think it's probably worth getting it. Especially for Lady Harrows, who are probably not only good warband, they're one of the more fun warbands.
Daniel Santos has pointed out that the box has Beastgrave on it, so the chances of the warbands getting phased out, I mean, I think that's zero.
Of course,
anyway.
yes, because Champions of Dreadfane is different to Dreadfane. Yes.
Yeah, so I think the chances of them cycling the warbands out anytime soon are pretty small.
But they haven't. I'm not sure they'll ever cycle warbands out. That's possibly a discussion for another day.
Yeah.
I know some people think they might.
Some people think they should, some people think they might, some people think they won't, and some people think they shouldn't. There you go.
And some people don't think.
And some people don't.
Cover all bases.
And some people just think.
People don't care.
If Dreadfane did get retired, there would be no Stormcast. Well, Severin came out in Nightfall, didn't they? But yeah. Anyway, I think if you're a completionist and you want to get all the warbands, obviously you're probably going to get it anyway. I think Lady Harrows are okay. I'm not a big fan of Stormcast, so I certainly wouldn't be getting it for Iron Soul.
I've had quite good fun playing Iron Soul. I didn't think I would, but I thought I'd try it. In fact, I think I'd try it. My patrons suggested that they voted for me to play them, but I've enjoyed playing them. They're not my wouldn't necessarily be my first pick, but I've had fun with it. They're very dice dependent. So some games are a lot more fun than others.
They literally need crits to inspire. So yeah.
Yeah, but. They're good, but I think Lady Harrows are not only competitive, but they're also really good fun. They have all sorts of shenanigans. So I would definitely recommend getting them. Jeff says for him, limited time to play games. He likes a game to have a competitive side. So that I know the casual side is more likely to be balanced. That's a reasonable, a good point actually, Jeff. That you are getting some balance thrown in. I suppose it's a bit like I was saying earlier. If you pick up the game casually, you can just play it, unlike 40k, which has got many more, was much less streamlined, therefore harder to play.
Yeah.
Hello and good night. See you, Jeff.
He's just mic dropped.
A little nugget of wisdom and then left, just like the true superhero that he is.
Dumped a little nugget on us.
Just nugget superhero.
I see what he means there, though. You know that if a game's got a highly competitive side, it's going to be a bit more polished. So that if you're playing a casual game, you're not going to have that question mark when you're in the middle of a casual game. You've only got an hour before you've got to go back home or sort the kids out or whatever else you've got to do. You know you're not going to sit there for 20 minutes just looking through a rule book going, I've got no idea what's going on here. What the hell? Although
that said, getting into something like Magic the Gathering terrifies me, because I know it's got such a huge following and it is very competitive.
Yeah,
I suppose it's a bit different because we come at things from a content provision point of view.
Yeah.
So obviously I've been playing Marvel Champions recently, and I really know that I'm not very good. So I kind of feel that from a content perspective, perhaps it's not as interesting as it might be because it's not going to be top level play. But that's interesting. That's an interesting one, actually. I was going to bring up, and indeed I am bringing up, that it's a cooperative game. Yet it has this kind of fiercely competitive element to it. People getting really quite arsy with people when they don't play the rules properly, or they say, well, there's no point. You're not going to play it properly. There's no point in playing. But people do genuinely make mistakes, and also it's a bloody cooperative game, or it's a single player game. So if you're enjoying it, play it how you bloody like.
Yeah. I mean, you can understand at least in something like AOS or 40k where one person stands to be disadvantaged if the other person plays the rules wrong. But when it's a cooperative game or something like that, who cares if you get a rule slightly wrong or you play it slightly wrong? I mean, by all means say, oh, by the way, you're meant to do this and not that. That's the actual rule. But there's no point getting arsy about it because you're just literally saying to someone...
somebody put a comment on my video today that I played a rule wrong, which is fair enough, I had.
Yeah.
And so next time I play it right. And he was really nice about it, and this comment isn't reflected on him at all. But I have seen people saying, oh, there isn't, if you're not going to play properly, why play? Because there are some interesting situations where you could suddenly find yourself in deep doo-doo just by drawing a card. But if you didn't play a particular rule, then the game would be much easier, and you could easily not play it. It wouldn't break it. That's the problem with a lot of competitive games, is playing them incorrectly that doesn't break the game. And it's only when somebody points it out to you that you go, oh yeah, I have been playing that wrong.
It's a bit like quite often we get, even now we still get comments from people who are newer to Underworlds where they'll go like, oh, you scored this objective in the second activation, then you drew a new card. What's that all about? You're like, yeah, that's how you play the game. You draw a new card, and then they have this light bulb moment where they go, holy crap, I've never done that. And you're like, yeah, well, you've just discovered a whole new facet of the game, which is going to make it that much more interesting for you.
Yeah, but also not playing it that way, as long as both of you are, it doesn't break it, does it?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make the game any. Well, it might make it slightly worse, but it doesn't doesn't break the game, so you can carry on playing.
Yeah,
incorrectly.
It's a bit like when people see other people's art, drawing, painting, whatever it is, whether it's painting models or whatever, and they tell them they're doing it wrong somehow. It's like, there isn't a right way to do this. It's just how you want to do it. And then people go, oh, I've got a Blood Angel chapter and I've painted them all purple. And people are like, well, technically the rules by the fluff, you can't paint them purple because they're meant to be red and yellow helms. Like, who gives a fuck? Go away. No one gives a shit. And it's the same with rules in those kind of, especially in cooperative games. Like, who cares? As long as everyone's having fun.
Yeah,
who cares?
Exactly. Well, there's people going on about how Magic can be easy to get into. I don't need to be reading those sorts of comments.
Magic's always turned me off a bit because I know it's a bit like looking at the ocean and thinking, if I have a paddle, I'm going to want to go deep diving, and therefore I don't want to go paddling because I don't want to go deep diving. That kind of thing. Okay. So that's what stops me from doing that. Yeah. There's too much out there. Whereas I go and I see a puddle, which is like the Underworlds being the equivalent of like a large puddle. I think I can splash around like a fucker in that. I can definitely have a go on that one, and I can pretend that I'm not bad at it, and splash around like an idiot. A bit like those videos you send of the dog that's got that muscle issue, and it jumps in that puddle. It's having a fucking lovely time. I'm that dog, right? I can do that. But the minute I see something like an ocean, I'd be like, no, too much. I want it all. I can't have it all. Therefore, I want none of it.
Rosa says he's tempted to play Get Marvel Champions now. He's seen my video. Well, yeah, there you go. Yeah. Do let Fantasy Flight know if you do, so that they might patronise us.
We have a lot of people who patronise us.
Yeah. I would recommend it if you've got time to play it. There's quite a lot of depth to it, and I haven't shown that yet on the video. So the next one will bring in one of the more tricky villains, and it adds some more mechanics. And it gets pretty deep. It's a Marlowe type game. There's definitely some crazy stuff you can do.
No Beef says next battle report he wants to see me in some waist high waders. How do you know I'm not wearing them right now?
Arkham LCG is Jan Sinkovic's favourite game. I've bought that to play with my wife, but so far it hasn't come out of the box, which is pretty much how it goes.
I'm going to add a saucy element to it. Strip Arkham LCG.
Yeah, no, I was trying to persuade her to play, not the opposite. We could do the opposite. I start without any clothes on. I get put the longer we play, the more I put on.
Win as fast as you can.
If we play this game, darling, I'll put my clothes on. Okay.
Jolly good. Or how about you just put your clothes on and fuck off a bit.
At the very least, shut the curtains.
Higher tier patrons get to see Pete from the waist down. Well, you know what? If people want it, we can add it to the. And Blood Bowl's another good one, because Blood Bowl is obviously a game that was meant to be competitive, because it's based on... Stop you yawning. Right, just because I mentioned Blood Bowl. Yeah, I know, shut up. Blood Bowl's another one where it's literally based on a competitive sport, so it's got to be a competitive game. But the rules and the mechanics in it make it inherently not very competitive at all. But people still love playing it. And that's, I think, a good sign of a game. Ooh, Rob Mark says he wants to see Garrick's Reavers versus Morgoth's Crushers.
We've got a couple of requests in tonight. Yeah, the best way to get those on the table is to be a patron. That's all I'm going to say.
Hashtag just saying. Hashtag. Yes, I think overall it comes down to why you're playing the game. If you want to play a competitive game, then you're going to play a competitive game, regardless of what the rules actually say or do, or what it's all about.
Yeah, we've got a question, Pete, that kind of touches on what you were saying earlier.
Ooh.
About tier lists. From Josh again. Do we feel that tier lists help or detract from the game? I don't really like them personally, because a lot of it is in the way you play the game yourself.
Yeah.
Like for example, if Tim plays the Aurochs, they're top tier. If I play the Aurochs, they're not.
They're
and that's
trash
not
tier.
that's not the new Aurochs. That's the old Aurochs.
Yeah.
So I think, it does help to an extent. Like if you're trying to understand why you can't win this game, and it might be because you're playing Eyes of the Nine. But I think that they're very subjective, and there are any given time warbands that are better than others, or I might say better, but are easier to win with than others. But I personally don't think they add a huge amount.
Yeah, I think they're a bit subjective, and maybe it's subjective of stats, which you can't argue. Maybe okay.
Yeah.
If you play, if you take Magor's, the last 6 Grand Clash winners has been Magor's. Okay, yeah, maybe you're taking a top tier warband, but there's still so many other factors involved there, like placement, board placement, cards, charge order, all that kind of thing. Which means that you could take a top tier warband and be shit with them, because we demonstrate that on a near weekly basis.
Yeah.
Or you could pick what are considered a bit of a trash warband and do really well with them. I think
we've had some good success with Eyes of the Nine. Well, we've seen success. Eric's Eyes of the Nine deck.
Exactly.
I think it also depends as well. If you're trying to get into the game, and you're looking at somebody says, "Oh, this warband's trash." If you don't have everything, then that completely changes everything anyway. Because partly what these decisions are made upon is for people who've got the entire card set. Well, if you haven't got the entire card set, there might be sort of certain key cards that render one warband much worse than it is with all the cards. If you see what I mean. So again, I think they're very subjective. Does that help? Or a bit 11 o'clock at night rambling?
I think it makes sense, and I do agree with that. And I think it's, I think overall I'm not a fan of it, because it just makes people pick straight away which things they do and don't want to play. Like if you tell people, don't play Skaven because they're trash, don't play Garrick Reavers because they're trash, then okay, maybe you're not picking one of the more effective warbands right now, but you're also then not picking some bloody really fun warbands to play with. And if you're playing because you just want to have fun, I love my games with Garricks, win, lose or draw. I always love games with Garricks, and I nearly always lose with my Skaven, but I like playing with Skaven as well. So I overall I don't like them. No,
I think a lot of it is dependent on piloting as well. So although there are some warbands that may be a little bit easier to pilot, if you're a good at piloting a particular warband and you know how it works, and it just appeals to you, then play it and don't worry about the tier list.
Yeah. Jan put a comment. He just picked someone that he thinks are most fun to paint and then never paint them.
Yeah, another fair and legitimate way of getting into Underworld.
That's as good as any other, frankly. I just play
Godsworn. Excellent.
Nice. I mean, I just like playing. I just like playing the warbands that I think are fun, the warbands that I enjoy the models of. Ooh, someone ringing someone. Ooh, have we lost Robin? There's a poor network connection. Ooh, I think we've lost you, Robin. We've lost Robin. It's that smile, that damn smile. Quick, Matt, get a screenshot. He always seems to stop his pictures at the most classic of points. He's always the most photogenic disconnector. I'm not sure what's going on there. I hope it's not my connection. Josh De Silva 3D, have you posted just a timeout thingy? Someone grab a screenshot, please, for the love of... Robin's back.
I'm back.
You freeze at the most photogenic point.
Did I again? Have I frozen again?
Sorry?
Oh, did I freeze again there?
You did.
My connection must be a bit...
You did freeze for some reason. Someone's saying to post your head onto a Cavill Superman. Bezzy82, sorry you're late. I'm afraid we are going to be stopping soon, but you'll be able to watch this back, so you can always rewind it and watch it again for tomorrow. So I think at the end of this rambling, tonight's random jibber jabber, we've kind of got to the point where we're kind of like, competitive play isn't bad for gaming, depending on how you behave when you're gaming.
Yeah. I think it's. I've been convinced that it's not. Having thought that maybe it was in places, I've been convinced that actually it's not at all. So there you go.
Yeah, I think there are some aspects of it that I don't like. Things like the tier lists, I'm not a massive fan of, because it's like, who cares if Eyes of the Nine are trash or not? Who cares if Grimwatch are the best warband or not? Because I think we instinctively, if anything, we avoid the more alpha warbands whenever we're playing, because we don't want to play the best, we want to play fun things.
Yeah, that's very true.
I wonder how much Eyes of the Nine would get attention if they were a really good warband. Would we give them half as much of our attention in that situation, kind of thing?
Probably not. I think.
And I think the other thing that Jan also just touched on there as well is the only problem is you can waste a lot of time focusing on being very competitive and not enjoying the game. And what do you get at the end of it? I mean, sure, you might be, the world's best Underworlds player or whatever. Is anyone going to give a shit about that in a couple of years' time? I'm going to guess probably not. If you enjoy doing that at the same time, then great, you've found something you enjoy doing. But I don't think a lot of people enjoy doing that, and I certainly enjoy the games we play more. And
definitely.
That's the way I'd rather play every single season, every single warband would be just have fun. As long as when you're becoming a competitive player, as long as you're still having fun and the people you're playing against are having fun as well, then you've hit that sweet spot, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's for keeping the experience fun, isn't it? That's important. And I think sometimes there was a worry for me that the competitive side of it means that you end up with people playing decks that aren't fun. But actually, in this game, and in most games, the balance is kept by the fact that the designers and whatever want to keep the games fun for everybody anyway. Yeah. Because otherwise people won't buy their game.
Yep, but you do have that problem, and we haven't talked about the entire episode, but you do have the problem that if you make a game that is incredibly balanced, that is very tactically nuanced, and is not very random at all, you risk making a game that has a clear winner, a clear loser, and you quickly find, okay, this is the best option, this is the way you play it, this is how you win. And when you get that set up, a game doesn't necessarily do very well. Guild Ball being the example.
Sorry?
Guild Ball being the example.
Yeah, although I think that Guild Ball wasn't the problem actually, that all or most of the teams were balanced. And it was very well balanced, and it just meant that actually you didn't need to keep buying stuff. You could just buy the one team, and then everything that came out was just as balanced. So you didn't need. So actually, although we moan about scope creep or whatever, not scope creep, power creep,
Yeah.
you have to have it. Otherwise, the game dies because people don't stop buying it. And
Yeah,
then,
but I think also the way they'd made the game, there wasn't as much skill. There wasn't as much luck involved. You didn't have the randomness of a card deck. You didn't have the randomness of dice
right.
quite so much.
So if you were good at it, you won.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
From what I understand of it all, and one of the reasons why they said it stopped doing so well was because new players would nearly always get their arse handed to them by an experienced player, whereas in Blood Bowl, even in Blood Bowl, you've got some chaos in there. You've got some randomness. Even with Underworld, you can play a game and you could swap teams or swap warbands and decks, and you could have a very different game the second time round. Whereas in Guild Ball, it was very much down to just who was the better player. Which, okay, if you're doing something really competitive, great, but it's not going to help the game flourish.
Yeah. Interesting. I always think about chess when we talk about these. People bringing up chess as an interesting one because that's obviously completely balanced, and it's done okay. Chess over the years.
Yeah, it's had a couple of years worth of 0 patches, and it's done okay.
But I guess sales in chess aren't huge. You only need to buy one set at the beginning of your chess career, and yet people still make and sell chess sets. Interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like there's still a market out there. But yeah, maybe Guild Ball just died because they didn't really keep it changing enough.
I don't know enough about it to really comment. I mean, I think although people have been playing Underworlds online, both Underworlds online and Games of Underworlds online.
Yeah.
I do think if you are making a competitive game, then COVID-19 is really not very good for it because people can't meet easily to play it. So I think that must have had something to do with it. But it'll be interesting to see how GW cope with that going forward. I don't know when big tournaments are going to be possible.
Yeah, but then, I mean, we talked about this before in that GW don't really have to have the pressure of having their own big tournaments. They can rely on local scenes to still do things, true. Which people are starting to do now.
People are starting to do, which is really good. Yeah, that is true.
So there we go. I think overall we kind of approached where we thought we would, which is actually overall competitive gaming on competitive play isn't bad for gaming, and especially not for Underworlds. It's all about how you approach that.
Yeah, I think that's fair play. That's fair play. Yeah.
So I think next week. Sorry, go on.
Just got this is the year of the solo games, competitive solo play. We'll win every time,
but also lose. Damn it! So I think next week we're going to be talking about hunters and quarries in Underworlds. I think we start to have a bit of a chat about that on Patreon in our Discord, which all our Patreon supporters get access to. And we will be talking about that a bit more next week and how we feel it's doing in Underworlds now that Beastgrave is complete. What we think they'll bring along in season 4. What we think is lacking. What we don't think is lacking. What they need to crank up and what they need to dial back.
That means coming up with some intelligent thought about the hunter quarry mechanic, which I'm not looking forward to. I might have to write more notes.
No, I'm just going to make shit up as I go along and rely on the comment thread.
So I can never remember which cards make you quarries, and most of them, a lot of them seem to make you quarries, but not much seems to make you a hunter.
There's not many things to make you a hunter, if anything. There's some upgrades, but we'll get into that next week.
Yeah.
David Henson says that is exactly what I plan on doing.
Winging it is good.
I'm fairly certain that all of you lovely people watching us are already following us on YouTube. But if you're not, do follow us, like, subscribe, thumbs up, all that good jazz. It all does help us.
Absolutely. And what are we doing this week, Pete? I'm playing Morgoth again, and you're bringing the Grimwatch. Is that right?
Bring the Grimwatch, yeah.
Yeah, it should be fun. Bit of hunter and quarrying going on in that game, I imagine.
There may be. There may very well be.
Yeah. Okay.
So
cheers,
I hope
guys.
Everybody's enjoyed this chat. Do tune in next time. Next week we may be at a slightly earlier time as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you're showing us. What's that? Shit?
I can't see me because my camera's so lagged out. No, Andrew wants to see that I've got done notes.
There you go. You did do notes.
I have done notes. Yeah.
Next week we might be a bit early. We might be starting at 9:30. Schools are back.
Yeah, keep an eye on the time for. I've got to get that approved certificate before we do. So keep an eye on the announcements. But it might be 9:30. If it's not 9:30 this week, next week, it almost certainly will be the week after.
Yeah. So do keep an eye out for the announcements.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Do stay safe and have fun at the Beast Grave, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.